Good evening, and I'm glad that you can join me again. Tonight's message I've entitled Occupied with Purpose. It's interesting as we look back at the Bible, at the biblical figures in the Bible, we see them occupied with purpose. They're commissioned with a task. For instance, Adam, the first man, was tasked by God to work and take care of the Garden of Eden, the Garden of Delight. Abel kept flocks, Cain worked the soil, and from them, both of them brought offerings to God. Noah, in holy fear, built an ark to save his family. Abraham was called to travel to the promised land. Has God placed a mission on your heart? Has He called you on the grand adventure of accomplishing a God-sized task? I think that we all need this. It's a chance to be a part of something greater than ourselves. And I see it in the biblical narrative and hear it in the call of Christ. Christ called His disciples to step out in faith and step into the miraculous. He called them to trade in the ordinary and to get involved in the extraordinary. He called fishermen to become fishers of men. He spoke the word and said to them, "Come, follow me, and I will send you out to fish for people." Come, follow, and be sent out on mission. A call to adventure. A call to be a part of something bigger than yourself. Hear the voice of God calling you out of your comfort zone and into the grand design. We've been looking at the book of Genesis and looking at Joseph. Joseph would later see that all of the events, all of his experiences, were all adding up to form a great woven tapestry of grand design and divine proportions on a grand scale. There were several moving pieces in his life, events in his life that were difficult to understand. First, how could his brothers betray him? Why would this happen? How could they desire to kill him and sell him into slavery? Why would he be sold and sent to a distant land? How could he be sold and bought, his freedom and rights stripped from him? Why would he be falsely accused by the wife of his master of sexual advances and put and placed in prison? How could he be sent to prison, locked in a dungeon for crimes he did not commit? Why would he be an overseer of a prison to tend to the needs of others? How could he be forgotten about and left in prison upon a prisoner's release and return to the Pharaoh? Why did he have to wait another 2 years in prison before he stood before the Pharaoh and was released? And how could he, a Hebrew who was once sentenced to prison, now be commissioned by the Pharaoh to the God-sized task and responsibility to care for the welfare of the entire world? For in Genesis chapter 41, verse 57, it says, "All the world came to Egypt to buy grain from Joseph because the famine was severe everywhere." Joseph was tasked to feed the world. You see, the famine wasn't only in Egypt, but all over. The events that happened in Joseph's life as difficult as they were, led him to this moment, to the moment of being occupied with purpose. You see that he is moved into position. But more importantly, he had already been developing the characteristics and the qualities and the abilities for the position. When Joseph was recommending that the Pharaoh look for a discerning and wise man to put in charge of the land of Egypt, Joseph knew that discernment and wisdom were fundamental attributes to leadership and administration. In the Amplified Version, it says, a man discreet, understanding, proficient, and wise, and set him over the land of Egypt. Where would Pharaoh find such a man? He found it and saw it in Joseph. Pharaoh said to those around him, "Can we find anyone like this man, one in whom is the Spirit of God?" And the Pharaoh said to Joseph, "Since God has made all this, the revealing and the interpretation of the dreams, the Pharaoh's dreams, since God has made all this known to you, there is no one so discerning and wise as you. You shall be in charge." You see, it was the Spirit of God that separated Joseph from others. It was God who was working in Joseph. God was the one working, providing the answers. God is the one revealing the plan. And God is the one orchestrating the event, determining the course. You see, Joseph was listening. This is what made him discerning and wise. Joseph had a listening ear. He is fit and equipped for the task. His ears were opened. He was in tune with God. He had ears to hear. With everything that had happened to Joseph, he could have become bitter. But he was resolved to be better. He was let down by family, but he didn't allow it to keep him down. He was sold into slavery, but he experienced the freedom that can only come from God. Freedom from bitterness. Freedom from rage. Freedom from resentment. Freedom from selfishness. Freedom from self-pity. He was wrongly accused and sent to prison, and yet he was determined to serve and minister to others instead of sitting around in the gloomy, damp, dark dungeon of self-absorption of the mind. The woe is me's and the poor me's could have been an easy song to sing, but that kind of tune only leads to a darker jail cell and makes the walls that more thicker, that more confined. Instead of turning inward to his problems and misery, Joseph showed great wisdom and discernment by turning outward, by serving others. The Bible says that while Joseph was there in prison, the Lord was with him. Through these hard, difficult, troubling experiences, it is these experiences that the Lord must be using to teach and train and develop Joseph for the task ahead. To be betrayed and still rise above. To be sold into slavery and rise above it. to be sentenced in prison and rise above, to be forgotten by those around you and still rise above. These are lessons to be developed only by trial, by going through the fire. As it states in 1 Peter chapter 1, verses 6 and 7. In all this you greatly rejoice, though now for a little while you may have had to suffer grief in all kinds of trials. These have come so that the proven genuineness of your faith, of greater worth than gold, which perishes even though refined by fire, may result in praise, glory, and honor when Jesus Christ is revealed. See, Joseph had gone through the fire, and he had come out stronger because of it. He had developed the characteristics and attributes needed for the task ahead. He had developed the position for the position. Because the Lord was with him, he was equipped. He was equipped for the challenge. As someone once said, God does not call those who are equipped. He equips those whom he has called. Where did Joseph learn how to lead? Where did he receive these valuable lessons? Where did he learn to manage and take on responsibility? As a slave in his master's house, as an overseer in a prison. Barbara Brown Taylor, in her book, Learning to Walk in the Dark, said that she has learned things in the dark that she could never have learned in the light. Things that have saved her life over and over again. So that there really is only one logical conclusion. She said, I need darkness as much as I need light. And she goes on to say that new life starts in the dark. Whether it is a seed in the ground, or a baby in the womb, or Jesus in the tomb, it starts in the dark. Now, after Joseph's time in the dark, he is ready for the task, occupied with purpose, a purpose greater than himself. He is placed in a position of great responsibility. He is given a new name, a title by the Pharaoh, and he is given a wife. We read in Genesis, if you have your Bible, we're in the book of Genesis still, with chapter number 41, and we pick up here in verse number 46. Joseph was 30 years old when he entered the service of Pharaoh, king of Egypt. And Joseph went out from Pharaoh's presence and traveled throughout Egypt. During the 7 years of abundance, the land produced plentifully. Joseph collected all the food produced in those 7 years of abundance in Egypt and stored it in the cities. In each city he put the food grown in the fields surrounding it. Joseph stored up huge quantities of grain, like the sand of the sea. It was so much that he stopped keeping records because it was beyond measure. Before the years of famine came, 2 sons were born to Joseph by Asenath, daughter of Potiphar, priest of On. Joseph named his firstborn Manasseh, and said, It is because God has made me forget all my trouble and all my father's household. The second son he named Ephraim, and said, It is because God has made me fruitful in the land of my suffering. The 7 years of abundance in Egypt came to an end, and the 7 years of famine began, just as Joseph had said. There was famine in all other lands, but in the whole land of Egypt there was food. When all Egypt began to feel the famine, the people cried to Pharaoh for food. Then Pharaoh told all the Egyptians, "Go to Joseph and do what he tells you." When the famine had spread over the whole country, Joseph opened all the storehouses and sold grain to the Egyptians, for the famine was severe throughout Egypt. And all the world came to Egypt to buy grain from Joseph, because the famine was severe everywhere. In verses 45 through 49, we see Joseph occupied with purpose. He's collecting all the food and storing it in the cities in the time of plenty. Production gives him purpose. In verses 50 through 52, Joseph has 2 sons. The first son, Manasseh, which means to forget. God is the one who has helped Joseph. God has helped Joseph to put the past behind him. God has occupied Joseph with purpose. Joseph said, "God has made me forget all my trouble and all my father's household." Dear friend, are you having trouble moving forward? Are you having trouble putting the past behind you? Are you allowing God to move you, to mold you, and to shape you? Joseph could move forward because, with God's help, he could leave the past behind. Joseph also had a second son, Ephraim, and Ephraim means fruitful. Joseph said, "Because God has made me fruitful in the land of my suffering." Dear friend, do you know that even in the land of your suffering, you can be fruitful? You know, I have a reminder in my office. It's on my wall that says, "Grow through what you go through." You see, Joseph's growth allowed him to be placed in a position to help an innumerable amount of people. When the famine hit, because the Lord worked with and through Joseph, the world would be fed. You see, God chose to work through Joseph, and Joseph was willing for the Lord to do a work in him. The situations and challenges that we go through are never easy. But just as the reminder in my office reminds me, we can go through what we go through. And by growing, we just might be able to help someone else along the way. Well, dear friend, I hope that this message has been a blessing to you. And I pray and hope that you have a blessed rest of your week. Until next time, bye-bye.